What is up, guys? How are we doing? Welcome back to another episode of the Jedi In Exile, where today we are continuing our series of reacting to trailers and then reviewing those movies. And today it is the turn of the OG Star Wars movie, A New Hope. Brian, how are you feeling about this week?
Yeah, we're back to where it all began. So,
Feeling
yeah, I mean,
nostalgic?
how do you sum this film up except for it is just the OG. Like, I don't think you can actually top it in terms of, I mean, not the quality of it, but that kind of adds to it. It just the how forward thinking it was for its time, how it started. Like this has affected generations. This film.
So I kind of want to preface our review with, no matter what we say in today's review, we need to just take a second to appreciate the fact that this is where it all started, and that without this movie we wouldn't have all of the stuff that we love. Okay, we wouldn't have all the stuff that we hate as well, but we wouldn't have all the stuff that we love, and Star Wars as a franchise would not exist.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I think not just that, we also need to kind of appreciate that this is where a lot of the special effects for the modern cinema that we used for years to come what kind of came from. This is where it all originated. So no matter what we say, there is love for this movie. We love this movie, but we need to actually kind of get into the nitty gritty of the movie, what happens, how we feel about the way things have been put together.
Yeah. So it's got. I mean, let's start from the beginning. It's always a good place to start. Unless you're making Star Wars, then you start halfway through.
Yeah, well,
Uh, the first scene. I mean, just iconic with, the Tantive, the small little ship, and then the fucking big old Imperial Star Destroyer coming down. I mean, that is
that's
just
iconic.
yeah, and then you see obviously Vader, the main villain, and again, not really seen anything like him on in cinema, and still to this day, he's one of the best Star Wars villains. Um, well, he's one of the best, sorry, movie villains of all time. You've got the hallway scene with him where he enters. Um, so normally these kind of films have a really slow start and it's building up the storyline. This was quite the opposite. It then gets slower later on with the whole R2 and 3PO down on Tatooine. We get introduced to another whiny Skywalker, the OG whiny boy. Obviously Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker. Get introduced to Tatooine. It's just all those iconic characters are introduced really, really early. So we get the villain of Darth Vader. Um, we get the Moff Tarkin villain really early on as well. We're introduced to Princess Leia, who, again, people talk about not having, female protagonists in films. Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia, was a female protagonist. You know, one of the main characters. And to begin with, the film almost portrays her as the main character because we don't see Luke for a little while.
It's also interesting because in kind of when we're first introduced to her, don't get, you see it from two sides, right? So you see this kind of quite aggressive, confident, sure of herself kind of individual when she's facing off against Tarkin and Vader. When the Tantive's been taken over and when she's first kind of been captured, but then she still plays this kind of damsel in distress that needs saving. However, George Lucas did that very kind of interesting thing of that's how Han and Luke and Obi-Wan kind of see her, but then when Luke first kind of breaks into save her, you get the whole aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper. She's not actually that fussed about the fact that someone's there to rescue her, and I think she kind of did a lot for that strong female lead.
Yeah, yeah, bloody right. And I think I mean, it's the story of like, obviously Luke Skywalker being like we saw in the trailer. Luke Skywalker was just a farm boy, and then his aunt and uncle are killed. This old wizard comes and bloody takes him, tries to take him to Alderaan, shows him his old religion. But it's A New Hope is so much better because of all the other Star Wars films that we've seen that add to the story. So like, when you're watching A New Hope for the first time in the cinema without ever watching any of the films, the Ben Kenobi speech talking about I was a Jedi Knight the same as your father, you know, I fought in the Clone Wars back when the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic, or the Dark Times before the Empire. That you can almost you get almost flashbacks in your own head now when you watch that, because you're getting the scenes of Anakin and Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars show. You're getting Attack of the Clones in your head. You then get the big battle of Mustafar when he says about a young Jedi called Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine before he turned to evil, murdered and hunted and murdered all the Jedi. He killed your father. Like, you're seeing this in your head, and you're like, oh my god. And to get such a big actor as Alec Guinness, that was such a coup for George Lucas.
So coming at it from the other side, like, obviously you can appreciate that now that you've seen, the prequels and all of the medium that came with the Clone Wars and all of that kind of stuff. But this, for me, was my introduction to Star Wars. This was me at, I want to say, like 4 or 5 years old, sitting down, VHS. My dad put it on for me because my dad was a massive Star Wars fan. And this was where I got hooked on Star Wars. I absolutely loved it. And the mental thing is that when I watched this, the prequels didn't exist. And, okay, I probably didn't understand this at the time, being so young. But looking back on it and re-watching it and trying to watch it from that, I don't know what happened in the prequels, and watch it kind of as like a standalone movie. The way that Alec Guinness delivers all of the dialogue that you were just talking about, when he's kind of saying about everything, I think it's mental that George Lucas managed to do this in such a way that you didn't need 2 hours of context to understand that the Empire was bad, the Rebellion were good, the Jedi were this kind of these like idolized beings, and that held some kind of importance and some kind of significance. And I think that's really clever, because like you said, most movies, they kind of start out slow, and it's that standard Hollywood kind of formula of there's some normality, then they introduce an issue, then they resolve that issue, and normality is resumed. And that's like how you make a story, right? Like, you set a baseline, you introduce a problem, you introduce a solution, and then it goes back to being normal. And that's kind of how it works. And this was very much like straight in. We don't know who these people are, but they did such a good job of Darth Vader. He's dressed all in black. He's evil. They've made the Imperials kind of very nondescript, almost dehumanized them with the stormtrooper outfits,
like upper English.
Yeah, and then the Imperial commanders, very, like the Empire was based on the Nazis. Like, that was the whole point, right?
Yeah, and the Empire was also based. I mean, the Rebellion was based on the Vietnam War, which obviously was in 1977. Although it had finished, it was fresh in a lot of people's minds. Clearly, it was 10 years prior. So the Rebellion being based on the Vietnamese, the guerrilla warfare, and the Empire, as well as based on the Nazis, America at the time as well. So that kind of, the undertones of that, it just probably resonated with a lot of people. But yeah, I think George Lucas did really well with this as actually telling a story, because yes, although it's a sci-fi film, because of all the the lasers and it's in space, blah blah blah, it doesn't come across as like a sci-fi film as we would know in today's world.
So I'm going to make a comment here that is very much like, it's going to be a similar to a comment I made about Rogue One. So Rogue One was a great standalone movie because it was a war movie set in the Star Wars universe. And if you guys missed our review on that, go watch it. I'll probably put a card or something above to link directly to that if you guys want to go and see that. But this, because it was written as a standalone movie, I know it wasn't, but it was released as a standalone movie. No one knew how it was going to do and all of that kind of stuff. You could lift this story and set it in World War One rather than setting it in space, and all of the themes would still run through it. You could still have your space battles, which were essentially just like World War dogfights, but set in space, in spaceships rather than in aeroplanes. You've still got this kind of war raging between two factions, so it very much feels of the same kind of ilk, and that's why Rogue One was so great. I know we're not talking about that, but that was why Rogue One was so great. It kind of captured the essence of this movie, and I thought this was great. I thought they did such a good kind of job at telling a story that could have stood on its own, but also allowed them to kind of go on, elaborate, left some question marks.
So one of the big points in this film, and after watching it again, that whole Ben against Vader fight, is this almost feels like it should be the end of the movie. And I think we're so used to like a big fight coming at the end of movies, like the big and this is a big meet. I know that we're gonna see they have another fight in the Kenobi series, which is coming up, but this feels so like, again, there's undertones to this fight. The fact that we know that Darth Vader was Obi-Wan's pupil. We obviously don't know at this point that he's Anakin Skywalker and the relevance it has to that, but you can kind of tell it's, the old man against the apprentice, master against learner. And I mean, the fight isn't great, and we know that's because the props, the lightsaber hilts, were so heavy that they had to do two-handed combat. So it's not the best. However, there's just so much significance, and it kind of really sets that Obi-Wan is like obviously this older character, the wizard, who dies. You see his body just disappear. There's just robes there, and then he's that kind of teacher in Luke's head, because straight away we hear him say, "Run, Luke, run!" And Luke jumps on the Falcon. But I think we don't really see until really probably episode 5 and obviously 6. I don't think we really see how powerful Obi-Wan actually is and was. And then obviously the prequels show that, loads more. But this fight was, for the storyline, was so good. It's just a shame that the technology of the time and everything, it couldn't have been a bit more impressive.
Yeah, and
from A New Hope to Empire is great. The Empire Vader against Luke fight is really quick, and it's one-handed moves. It's brilliant.
I think the other thing that that kind of really is interesting about this is, and I'm going to go back to kind of the point that I was making about the conversation the dialogue that Obi-Wan has when he's giving Luke the lightsaber and he's telling him the backstory about the Jedi and the Clone Wars and all of that kind of stuff, is the little comments that have been made, and this is probably credit to those that then were involved in the prequels and made this make a bit more sense. But you can watch this having never watched a Star Wars movie, and this fight makes sense, and you understand the gravity of what this fight means, and then also go back and watch the prequels and all of that kind of stuff and watch this movie, and it just adds to it. And it's not that watching it the first time isn't impactful. Like it's you understand what's going on completely, but then watching it with the prequels then adds more. And so it's watching it from both sides, from both aspects. This fight is kind of super meaningful and really emotional for different reasons.
So much hatred towards Ben because he's one of the few Jedi that has managed to elude him. Vader knows that he is alive because obviously he loses to him on Mustafar, and so he would have probably thought about Obi-Wan every single day since Mustafar, thinking, I need to get him back, and the hatred has just built up to this moment, and it must have felt really bad for him that he kills Obi-Wan, but Obi-Wan gives up. Like, so it's like Obi-Wan gets the last laugh, doesn't he? But yeah, like you say, after watching the prequels and going back, you realise the gravity, the significance of it all, and it's just brilliant.
I really like the fact that this is like in the middle of the movie, and that this isn't that this isn't how the movie ended, because it's a really good kind of plot device to kind of move things on, and it really solidifies this whole. It sets up Empire and the big reveal at the end of Empire. Spoiler alert, because Luke has first-hand witnessed Vader kill him. Like it just sets the platform for that so well, and it's also that kind of that really solidifies that Luke needs to join the rebellion and do all of that. I know that he had wanted to anyway, but this is kind of
and I think it shows Luke obviously losing all those. He's lost his aunt and uncle and Ben in the space of like 24 hours, basically, or a short space of time, and he's lost everybody who is kind of a role model to him. So he thought that Obi-Wan was going to teach him the ways of the Force. As far as they were concerned, they were going to Alderaan because he's called General Kenobi. That's another thing I just love. Princess Leia calls Obi-Wan in the message General Kenobi. They're going to Alderaan. They're going to meet up with Leia. They've got the plans to the Death Star, and the Rebel Alliance is going to blow up the Death Star, and then Luke's going to learn the ways of the Force from Obi-Wan, and all that is taken away from him, like with one swing of Vader's sword. And it also solidifies that Vader is definitely a villain. He's just murdered somebody. So again, there's no way that he can't, not be the villain. He's destroyed a planet, him and Tarkin together. But it also, when we talk about villains, in this movie, it's almost like Tarkin is above Vader. That Vader reports to Tarkin because Vader does the famous the Force choke. I find your lack of faith disturbing, and Tarkin's like, Vader, release him.
But that's because he is. He is. So in some of the other kind of literature that's out there, it's made really clear that that Tarkin is in charge of the Death Star. The Death Star was Tarkin's project, and that the Emperor gives Tarkin Vader, and he reports to him. And he's in charge of him because it's one of the things that Vader absolutely hates, because obviously in Vader's own head he sees it as he is the number 2 to the Emperor, and this kind of like him being assigned to Tarkin kind of knocked him down a peg or so. So yeah, but no, it's really interesting that's kind of that was done, and then they've expanded on that. But go on. I
was just going to say, just expanding on the Death Star while we're talking about it, like, I think we have to give props to the ILM guys who basically built for like the trench run. They built models of everything, so they built an entire Death Star that they could then film. So what we're seeing here is actually part of the model. This isn't effects. This is them filming that trench run, and I think that's what amazes me about this film. And it isn't in a lot of the prequels as well. Phantom Menace, they built models of like the pod race, the Bunta Eve, the stadium. It was all models.
So I think it's really
doing it.
Oh yeah, and on that, if anybody watching is like mad into that kind of stuff, there is a documentary. It's available on Disney Plus. I think it's called Behind the Magic, I'm pretty sure, and it's essentially a documentary about Star Wars, about A New Hope, and about kind of the struggles that George Lucas had kind of getting it greenlit, the struggles that he had while filming it. But they go really in depth into how they did a whole bunch of the special effects, and it's absolutely crazy to kind of look at what they did. And as we said earlier, like, the effects that they were using and the stuff they were doing was absolutely groundbreaking. Like, this stuff hadn't been done before. And if you go back and watch other movies, this came out in 1977. If you go back and watch other movies that were released around the same sort of time, even into the early 80s, that were so technologically behind this stuff, it just gives you another appreciation for like how this must have been to go and watch this when it was first released and experience all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, something else that we were speaking off camera beforehand that I feel really, it adds to all the Star Wars movies, but I think it's helped create the kind of cult that it is the music. So, you know, from other films, other Star Wars films as well, everybody knows the Star Wars theme. Everybody knows the Imperial March. Everybody knows, I think this is something you wanted to talk about, Matt. Everybody knows the Binary Sunset music, where you can, for those watching on YouTube, you can see, you know, Luke there, the famous clip of him hand on knee looking at the two twin suns of Tatooine.
This is like the definition for me. This is the definition of a photo you can hear. That piece of music. We say it every single time, but like John Williams, just what an absolute like gem that guy is. Yeah. Everything that he touches just is incredible. Yeah, like this for me, like you said, so we've got the ridiculously iconic Star Wars like theme music, the Imperial March, and then this for me this is probably my favorite ever classical piece of music. This and Across the Stars from Episode 2 are two of my favorite pieces of classical music. Not that I'm a huge classical music fan, but like,
not a huge Episode 2 fan, but you know, whatever.
Hey, you have to go watch our. Don't give it away. You have to watch our Episode 2 review to find out on that one.
Maybe he is a big Episode 2
fan. Yeah, maybe he's just drawing you in. But no, like, I think there was so much kind of going on behind the scenes. Like John Williams, when they got him in, again, that Behind the Magic documentary, just George Lucas in it talks about how incredible John Williams was with this, like writing all of the music and then going and kind of being the
theme tune.
Like, it's just like the guy is ridiculously talented. Is all I'm gonna say.
It's added to so much of the story that, you know. I mean, and you just look at the films that John Williams done, you know, and think of what his music has done, and like you say, this scene without the music, you know, isn't really that impressive. Like, you add, you know, the orchestra in, and it is iconic.
It's the swell. It's that whole thing of, in this exact moment, you know exactly how he is feeling, and it's nothing to do with what you're seeing on the screen, really. It's that kind of culmination of this music that just swells, and it's absolutely incredible scene. Absolutely love it. I kind of, I'm kind of speechless talking about it, which is odd for me.
Yeah, it really is. Now, we always do a rating out of 10. I suppose before we get to that though, because we haven't really spoke about, the trio, if you like, of Luke, Han, and he is Han, even though I constantly say Han.
Han, right?
Luke, Han, and Leia.
Han like Han.
And Leia, Luke, Han, however way you want to say it, and obviously Chewie, like all these characters. Again, we use the word iconic characters. I mean, how different they are as people, how well they work as, you know, this ragtag bunch of rebels. And the fact that Han's like that scoundrel, Luke's like the dreamer, Leia is the one, you know, fighting the man. And you know, she's the one leading, you know, the rebellion after her father dies.
And I feel like this is, you know, Harrison Ford's career kind of took off after this, right? Like he was
absolutely, he was a carpenter before this.
He was one of the big kind of success stories.
Indiana Jones right after this, didn't he?
Yeah. But I just think this was kind of like a perfect group of characters in that, like you said, so Luke's kind of like the dreamer, the idealist, the kind of, I'm going to go fight evil in the galaxy and join the rebellion. Leia's...
take on the Empire by myself.
Yeah.
Hey, Luke's got this one.
Leia's kind of that strong kind of
the realist out of them all.
Yeah, and she's kind of the strong, get the job done kind of person. And then Han's that kind of lovable rogue kind of, a little bit rough around the edges, but realistically, you know he's going to do the right thing, and all, you know. I just think that as kind of a marriage of characters was ticked all the boxes that you want to see in a movie. And then Chewie, obviously not super talkative, but you know, just in there as that supporting character, but also feeling like he's part of the group. Obviously only supportive because he didn't get a medal.
Exactly. It is a travesty. Where is Chewie's medal? He's a veteran that's not been rewarded. I feel like with Chewie as well, even though he doesn't ever obviously talk, you still know what he's basically thinking and saying, which again is just clever storytelling.
See if you watch A New Hope on Disney Plus with the subtitles on. Sometimes the subtitles they've given you, the subtitles are obviously taken from the script because some of the subtitles have what he says.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Not all of them, but some of them have what he says, which is quite funny. Just to kind of as a side note, unless they've changed it, but that's what it used to be. I think for a movie that had so many problems, kind of outside of the movie itself, so kind of with production and with all of that kind of stuff, I think all you can do is applaud that they managed to get what they got onto the screen. Now, I think for me it probably is a good time to roll round into ratings. But I think before we do, you just kind of have to, for those that don't know, if you go watch the Behind the Magic documentary, it does explain a lot of it, and I think it gives you a real appreciation of what they were up against with all of this kind of stuff. Because at the time, George Lucas he wasn't a big name. He was struggling to get funding. He didn't really want to relinquish control of the project. He didn't want to do it all under a big studio where they were going to come in and kind of cut a bunch of the content and everything. He wanted to deliver his vision, and because of that, they struggled for money. One of the things that I was saying to you just before we came on is that there's that really iconic kind of Easter egg blooper, whatever you want to call it, of the stormtrooper running and hitting his head on the door, and that was left in because they were already over schedule and over budget and they couldn't afford to reshoot, which is insane to think, right, roll the camera for another 30 seconds and we'll just re-record these people running down a corridor.
The reason why George Lucas could sell Star Wars to Disney for so much money was because when he pitched Star Wars and he got the money from at the time 20th Century Fox, they had such little faith that they let him keep the merchandising rights.
Yeah.
And so that's why he could sell to Disney for a $5 billion valuation, because Disney were buying the merchandising rights of him. And so that's what's crazy, is that 20th Century Fox, could have made so much money from Star Wars, and in the end they had such little faith, because it probably was goofy. Not really had anything quite like it. Not had anything really like it since, in a lot of aspects. So it just probably seemed a bit goofy to them, but yeah, they probably wouldn't have made that mistake ever again after that.
So putting that stuff aside, so put aside all of the issues that they had, put aside how groundbreaking it was in regards to technology and all of that kind of stuff. So based purely on sitting down, watching the movie and enjoying it, and kind of how it sits within the grand scheme of things, talk to me about a score.
It's going to be a 9 from me.
Okay.
Feel like it's got one of the best storylines as a standalone film in the Star Wars saga. Obviously got the great characters, seeing them at the beginning. It's just, the whole that is the, I know Return of the Jedi kind of, they do it as well with their, destroying the Death Star, but because this was the original, where you kind of sense that in the movie when they defeated the Death Star, they had defeated the Empire, which of course is far, far from the truth. We know that now, but to us, the audience, whole culmination of, they were either going to be destroyed on the planet, or they were going to destroy the Death Star. Like, it was one of those two options. That was it. Really drew you in. You're really like, when they're like 30 seconds until you're having four in range, you're on the edge of your seat. You're like, are they going to get it? Are they going to get it? So the exhilaration of it all, yeah, a 9. It's not quite a 10 because unless it's Revenge of the Sith, you just can't get a 10. Just because of, obviously, and I know we're saying we can't really take that into it, but I suppose it's the technology. It's the fact that, the lightsaber duel, there wasn't really a lot of lightsaber in there because clearly Luke needs the training. The Ben Vader fight was disappointing. Not at the time, but obviously now we've seen the others. So yeah, I feel confident. I'm happy with giving it a score of 9. Because in my opinion, I mean, we've done a ranking before, but it's really high up on my list of Star Wars films for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and I would agree. So I would give it a 9 as well. I think if you're comparing apples for apples with Episode 3 and this, you've got to say that this has got the character, it's got the plot, the characters, it's got the plot, it's got that kind of emotional investment and buy-in, which actually is really impressive considering when you have that from Episode 3, you have that because of the culmination of Episode 1 and Episode 2. So this is really impressive that they managed to do that in a movie. But I think, yeah, that unfortunately, like, and it feels blasphemous to say it, but the technology let it down because of the time. If you take a prequels lightsaber fight and you insert that into Episode 4 somewhere, then I think you're hitting a 10 for me.
There's a fan-made video, isn't there, of the Ben Vader fight where somebody's done a really poor job on editing Alec Guinness's face onto Obi-Wan, but the fight itself is, amazing. But yeah, I think 2 scores of 9. I think that's healthy. Listen, it's higher than we scored Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones.
Well, it's not higher than I scored Phantom
I know
Menace.
it's not higher than you, but any reasonable, logical person would score Phantom Menace.
That is our review, guys. Obviously, there's probably stuff we've missed. I guarantee there's stuff that we've missed. You guys might agree with us, you might disagree with us. Let us know what you would have scored out of 10 down in the comments below. Let us know what key things we might have missed, because it's always interesting to know what you guys think and what you guys would have said had you been here. Comment section is your opportunity to do that and voice your opinions. But other than that, thank you for reaching this point in the video. As always, massively appreciate all the support and all the love you guys have been giving us on all of our recent videos. We wouldn't keep creating if you guys didn't keep watching, so thank you so much. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share this out, help us keep building the channel and keep building the following. And other than that, all that is left to say is we will see you guys all in the next one.
The Force be with you.